What's the topic?
The attack on the evangelist.
You guys are Christian, Muslim, Jewish?
I'm a Christian. I believe Godless is atheist, and if Murphy's is Muslim. Mm. And Rabbi, I assume that you are Jewish.
Yes.
And look at this stage, man. Like, this stage has an atheist on it, a Muslim on it, and a Jewish person on it. Instead of bashing the person that has the ability to have conversation with other people and listen to them and then listen to them, instead of bashing that person down, you should be like, that's beautiful. And that's not what happens.
But that's always my approach, by the way. My approach
go ahead, Rabbi.
Is to work alongside all ethical people. And I consider Christians ethical and Muslims ethical as well. I mean, clearly there's bad Christians, there's bad Jews, there's bad Muslims. But overall, we've been sensitized by the same source, which is the words of God, the life-changing words of God.
Yeah, let me make sure. I want to say something. Some of the most ethical people I've ever met in my life were atheist people. I want you to know that. Like, I have a guy who's like my dad's best friend, who's like my uncle, and I love him probably even more than my uncle. And he's an atheist. This man is one of the most beautiful, kindest people in the world. He's so kind that people like take advantage of him all the time. I've never heard him say one bad word about anyone, even if it's been known that they've done him like tremendously wrong. He's just so beautiful. So I just want it to be known that I believe that there are atheists out there that can be very, very ethical. And I don't know if you disqualified that from the equation intentionally, but if you didn't, please let me let you know that I don't believe that atheists don't have the ability to be ethical. Would you agree or disagree with that?
No, I agree they have the ability. Although the most unethical people I've met have been particularly atheistical individuals. But that's fine. I've met many ethical atheists. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just the thing with atheism, it's more of a reactionary movement, meaning if you go by the descriptive term atheist, you're basically saying there is no God, right? Well, the average religious person, we all struggle with our beliefs here and there, right? And we believe in faith, but an atheist is in some way convinced there's no God. So an agnostic is a title I like more. I identify myself as an optimistic agnostic because I think it's hard to really know fully if God truly exists. I mean, we believe in faith. But an atheist seems like kind of fanatical, just the term. However, most atheists that I've met, the average atheist, is really an agnostic, and they're not really atheists.
Wow, like it blows my mind that you would say that the atheist is fanatical, because I think that in some ways, I do know what you're talking about. Please don't let me act like I'm taking a blind eye. But one of the reasons why I think sometimes you see atheists acting that way towards theism is because of what has been inflicted often upon them. Like, for example, if I'm, and even like the comment, Rabbi, that I like the term better atheist than agnostic. If I'm merely telling you what it is that I believe, if I'm coming to you and I'm like saying, I just don't see it, like, I want to believe it, or even like if I say, I'm like, I really just don't see it, right?
I think you're breaking up a little bit.
And I'm telling you that truth. Oh, sorry. If you begin to tell me things like I'm unethical, or let's say I'm going to burn in my blubber forever and ever, and you begin to do these things, I might create a culture that is very much in response to a fundamental radicalism. I have to
reactionary,
tell you,
essentially. Yeah. It's reactionary.
Rabbi, some of the Christians that I know on this app are no different than a lot of the atheists that you meet. I have atheist friends on here that we have dialogues till the sun comes up, and it's beautiful. And then there's atheist rooms that you can go to, and it has a different tone to it. Same with the Christians. There's some Christian rooms you can go to and truly it's something beautiful. And there's other Christian rooms that you can go to that are just as terrifying, just as despicable and ugly.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. There's radicalized Christians, just like there are even radicalized Jews. Someone who's just not convinced, that person is rightly defined as an agnostic. Agnostic means that you don't have knowledge of. That means you just don't know. That's why I said that the average atheist is really an agnostic, because an atheist knows that there is no God. He proclaims that there is no God. And that, I think, is as crazy as yelling on a street corner that there is a God. We may perhaps have evidence, we don't have proof. I think it's healthy to doubt. The difference is if you're a pessimistic doubter or an optimistic doubter. For example, I know that people who believe in God, they give more charity than the average man. They volunteer more time. I would expect more goodness from someone who tries to live by some standard or some code than someone who develops or fabricates that code on a daily basis. And that's what the average non-believer does. I'm not trying to attack atheists. I'm just trying to compare Christians, atheists, Jews, and Muslims to see why someone is more benevolent than the other one. And I think just by trying to adhere to some absolute standard of goodness, I think it gets you to do more good than if there is no absolute standard in your life to begin with.
I just disagree with you. I think that the atheist can have a standard and be ethical without even the need of God. You can be ethical without needing your belief in God. We don't believe in God because, and that's why we act right. Like, I'm going to act right because there's a God. I'm going to act right because it's the right thing to do. My relationship with God bleeds into how I treat other people, nevertheless, yes. But I'm not acting right to earn this approval or this acceptance. So the person that is an atheist can perfectly well have a framework of what is ethical and what is not ethical. Because like I said, I know someone in particular who is more ethical than some or a lot of Christians that I've met. So I think that
I think if someone is going to make a statement,
you said something about honesty, right? You said something about honesty. And that's the thing, Rabbi, if I'm a person that says, let's say I've experienced some atrocities in my life. I've seen painful things. I have seen suffering in my life, and I haven't been able to explain these things adequately with enough revelatory knowledge to bring me to a place that I say, yes, there's a God. If I come to you and I say, there's no God, out of my pain and what I'm experiencing or whatever have you, I'm saying there's no God. If I say that, what is it that I deserve? Do I deserve for you to condemn me? Do I deserve for you to tell me that I have an incapacity to do good things to people? What is it that I deserve when I come to you and I say, this is how I feel and this is how I'm seeing my reality or those things pertaining to a creator? What should be the response of the other person to me when that person is expressing that, the way that they feel about that?
I don't think we're disagreeing. I'm trying to make the argument that someone who submits to some absolute standard of ethics is by definition going to be more ethical. I'm not saying an atheist can't be an ethical person, but you're a religious person. I'm pretty sure you acknowledge that living a religious existence makes you more kind, makes you more charitable, makes you more benevolent, right? More. I'm not saying the other person can't be kind and charitable and just benevolent all around, but you would acknowledge that being sensitized by the word of God helps you be more ethical, correct?
I would say that my relationship with God doesn't it's really a thin line because
it can't be all relative. I mean, that's
it's
my
like
point.
No, it can't be. My relationship with God bleeds into my heart and then begins to affect my behavior. I definitely do believe that. But it's almost like this idea of working from the outside in versus the inside out. So it's like I'm ethical so that I can have a relationship with God, right? There's that idea. And then there's this idea that my relationship with God the love that I got going on here is starting to be reflective in how I treat myself and how I treat others, you know?
Mhm.
And so you're right to say that, because it's the love being expressed through that. But to say that an atheist doesn't have a standard of being ethical, I disagree completely.
An absolute standard. I mean, an absolute standard.
No, I absolutely think, because when I think of this one individual in particular, he has a standard that, like, doing harm to a fly is like wrong. That's like just how loving he is.
By them even creating an absolute standard, they're in some way elevating something to the level of the divine, of the untouchable, or of the unchangeable. That's religious talk. We believe in absolute standards because we believe in a good God, a God that's made holy through righteousness. I think that the average atheist nowadays who is ethical has a standard because he had a grandmother, a parent, a great grandparent who was possibly religious. It's really what's called cut flower ethics. That means if you cut a plant, it'll bloom for a little while, but it'll eventually die because it has no roots. And this is what we saw with places like, let's say, the Soviet Union, Cambodia, Cuba, or North Korea. Basically, any society that tried to reinvent the wheel ethically, that detached itself from the biblical standard, ultimately left a trail of blood and carnage.
Yeah, I'm just not with you on it, because like everything from Christianity to Islam to Hitler to eugenics leaves a trail of blood behind it, and that's just humanity for you.
Which one's worse and which one's better? I mean, that's my argument. In life, things are typically between what's good and what's better, not what's
like, Rabbi, if you're trying to bring somebody into a relationship with God based off of ethical behavior, I think that you are missing, like, almost like they don't need God to be ethical. It's not about ethical behavior. Matter of fact, my relationship with God is not contingent upon my ethical behavior. I'm not loved if and only if I do these righteous things. And that's the whole thing. Like, that's the whole issue, is that we approach people as if to say that they cannot be ethical. Like, here's the other thing. If I have a pair of little kids and I give one 10 candy and I give the other one 2 candy, without me teaching them anything, there's this sense of injustice. I didn't have to teach them anything for them to know that. And I do believe that God has created us in a way that there are some things that are written on our hearts. And when human beings put their brains together, some of these things are able to come to the surface, like what is beneficial to ourselves and what is beneficial to our society. But these things are just beautiful facets of humanity that we are capable of. But our relationship with God is way more than just following an ethical standard. Like, the ethical standard is good only because it causes us to live a more beneficial life and is healthy to us. It doesn't cause us to die. It doesn't lead us into harm's way. And of course, that's God's standard, of course, for us, but not because we're gaining his approval, but because that is what he wishes for his creation, is for them to operate in the way that is most beneficial to them. You understand what I'm saying?
That's the Jewish-Christian divide. God in the Jewish Bible tells us that we will only be special to him if we keep his commandments, his ethical code. Apart from that, I mean, there's potential in all of us, but unconditional love is not a trait of the Jewish God. It's not so matter-of-factly. It shows that God did love us first from a Jewish perspective because he gave us the revelation to aspire to. He gave us that code, what we call the Torah. That was the initial, act of love that God showed us. But after that, if we didn't reciprocate, if we didn't acknowledge that love can exist without standards, then why should he? I mean, if he loves everyone equally, then it's just a washout. It doesn't really mean anything. I don't think that helps anyone. Now, I'm also convinced that the Bible is not there to make you good. I believe that the Bible and the Torah is there to make you better. I believe that people do have a basic sense of morality, but I think the Bible is there to polish you up, to keep you consistently ethical. This is why I'm a proponent of the Bible. Even my example of societies that were atheistical, being a lot more unethical than those that are not. I'm not saying, we're not talking about utopia here. I'm not saying that religious societies, I mean, we see it in many ways, they're primitive, they're backwards. But overall, the reason I remain religious is because it makes you a better person. It gives your children some structure. Children that grow up with some sort of nihilistic existence, thinking that they're like a piece of cosmic garbage, there's no purpose in life. You're telling me that person has a tendency to be happy or has a tendency to want to help others? I think, yes, there are many ethical atheists, but I think they're ethical in spite of the lack of direction that they have in their life, unfortunately.
I think the Old Testament is establishing that there is a sense of justice that comes with a hand for a hand, an eye for an eye. Like there is a sense of justice that does come with that. And so I think what the Old Testament is doing is first establishing that there is this sense of justice, right? But then what I think the New Testament is doing is saying that I'm going to go beyond justice and I'm going to now add the element of restoration. And so, and reconciliation, I should say. So
wait, hold on. So what does restoration mean in context?
To reconcile back to God.
So then there's still this understanding that Jews were in some way not connected with God enough, and there had to be some sort of reconnection. Or
no,
are you talking about?
I would say that
regarding original sin.
No, I would say that humanity as a whole needs a savior. If you're a Christian, right? Not just the Israelites. The narrative being told through the Israelites is developing contrast in the world.
So it seems that even according to Christianity, the expectation of good behavior and adhering to some ethical code was always there. Even though you were saved by faith, you were judged by works. He makes a statement that a good tree doesn't produce bad fruit and vice versa. So one sign that your religiosity or your salvation was validated was that you were producing good works. At the end of the day, we'll still end up in individual moral training, which is what makes us exceptional.